And welcome back. Now some of you may recognize this Saturn SL1. It used to belong to my cousin, but now I own it. It has a few other issues and we're going to go ahead and get one of them fixed today, starting with the valve cover. Now first, visual inspection, you can see that the valve cover is leaking oil right out of its gaskets. The second inspection is to put your hand right here on the strut tower and do the taste test. Yes, it should taste a certain way. No, actually, I'm just joking. You do not have to put your hand on the strut tower. But we're going to go ahead and remove the ignition wires just to get them out of our way. And now we can remove this hose coming from the valve cover going to the air box. Mine came off pretty easy, so you should not have any problem with it. But if you want, you can loosen the clamp on the throttle body and that'll just give you a little bit extra slack. Now there is one fastener behind the valve cover. It comes off pretty easy. Just make sure you put it somewhere safe since it's a very small fastener. You don't want to lose it. Now we can remove the main fasteners that hold the valve cover down. There are some rubber grommets behind the fastener, and when you remove the fastener it may come up with it, but it's really not a big issue. It doesn't matter if it comes up with a fastener or if it stays attached to the valve cover. You just want to make sure you don't lose any of that stuff. And now with all of that out of the way, we could actually try to lift up the valve cover. Now at this point, the only thing you're going to be fighting is that one rubber hose that's right in the center of the valve cover. And it's really difficult to get off with the valve cover still attached because it's such a short hose and there's no play between the valve cover and the intake manifold. This is why I'm taking it off as I'm lifting at the same time. And the difficult part is when we're putting everything back together, you're gonna have to fight against that rubber hose again. Look at this. Look at this, we got tool delivery. You're gonna be in my next YouTube video, man. Show them the ratchet. So the Milwaukee tool went out for warranty and they just gave us a brand new one, so that's always nice. Here I'm using a paper towel to try to soak up some of the oil, but I wouldn't recommend scrubbing with it because little pieces of it can fall off and potentially fall into the engine, and you don't want that to happen. So I would recommend using some sort of a rag instead. Now we want to get this surface as clean as possible in order for a new gasket to seal properly. So if there's anything caked on there like this, you want to make sure you get all of it off. Here I'm using a razor blade and I'm holding in the upright position and just kind of dragging it across the cylinder head. You don't want to come at too much of an angle and potentially grab the aluminum and put a gouge in it, and that's going to cause a leak. Now there are some places that are much more difficult to reach if you have a blade just between your fingers. So a tool like this really helps to get into those tight places. Now that you're done with all of your scraping, it's time to clean the cylinder head with brake parts cleaner. But do not spray it directly on the head because it could get inside of the engine and mix with your oil, and nobody wants that. Instead, just spray the brake parts cleaner on a rag and use the rag to wipe down the cylinder head all the way around. And at this point, you want it looking completely spotless how I have it here. With everything done on the engine, now we could focus on the valve cover itself. I'm just going to go ahead and peel off the old gasket if it didn't already fall off on yours. And this isn't the final cleaning right here where the gasket's going to sit. I'm just trying to clean all of the big chunks out of here. I'm going to go ahead and flip over the valve cover, and I'm going to take this opportunity that it's off of the car to actually clean the valve cover, because it just looks really bad and we could make that look better. Now you don't have to clean your valve cover, but it's already off the car, so why not? In case you're wondering, I only clean the outside of the valve cover. There's no need to clean the inside. You don't want to get any type of contaminant inside of there once you put the valve cover back on the engine. Now to clean the valve cover, you can use soap and water or even brake parts cleaner, but I'm going to give you a pro tip. And that would be to use WD-40. It's what I use to clean this one. Just spray the whole outside of it, let it sit for a few minutes, and it really loosens up that dirt. And I'm also using WD-40 right here on the channel of where the new gasket's gonna sit. It does a great job at breaking down dirt and grime. just how we need that cylinder head to be nice and clean, the valve cover end has to be just as clean. If there's any dirt or debris left behind, there's more of a potential for it to leak. Now that everything is all cleaned up, we have one more step before we can put everything back together. Right where the cylinder head mates up to the timing cover, you're going to see these two small lines, one on top, one on bottom. And we're going to place a little bit of RTV silicone right here. And that's basically just in case there's any imperfections where the cylinder head meets the timing cover, and there usually is. So this is why it's recommended that you do place some silicone right here. Now you don't need a lot. You can see I'm just putting a very small amount here, and that's all you need. Now with that out of the way, we could go ahead and place our new gasket on the cylinder head. Now this car is a little weird because you actually have to place the gasket on the head itself. Most cars that I've worked on, well, this is just my experience, but most cars that I've worked on, the new gasket usually goes on the valve cover side, and then you just set the whole thing on top of the cylinder head. So I thought this was a little bit weird, but I'm not surprised. Now you're going to notice that I'm spending a lot of time here, and the reason for that is it's the reason why we're here, because of a leak. So if you mess something up right now because you're trying to rush and it starts leaking again, you're back to square one. So just make sure that the gasket is in its correct position and everything's 100%, because once you put that valve cover on top of it, you don't want the valve cover to pinch the new gasket, and you sure don't want the valve cover to move the gasket out of its original place. So just go ahead and take your time here. Now with the gasket all set, you could go ahead and put your valve cover back on, and there you go. Nah, I'm just kidding. I could hear you guys screaming at the screen already. What are you doing? You're supposed to show us. You suck. Anyway, yeah, so it went on pretty easy. Minus that one hose in the center of the valve cover that I did mention earlier, the hose that goes to the PCV valve right there. So just make sure you get that thing started as you're kind of angling in the valve cover, and once you get it started and everything's going, at this point it's really critical that you lay it nice and flat on the valve cover, or not on the valve cover, on the gasket itself, and you don't move the gasket. So this is another spot right here where you just really want to take your time, and before you start bolting anything down, just make sure 100% that the gasket is still in its correct location. And now it's time to replace the two grommets that go on the main fasteners of the valve cover. These two grommets should have been included in your valve cover gasket kit. So just go ahead and remove the old ones and make sure you take off this metal washer, and then you could kick the old ones to the curb and reinstall the new ones. Now it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. I gave mine a quick cleaning, but nothing too fancy. And now you can reinstall those fasteners. Now just run them down with your hand at first. They got the grommets on them, so it's going to want to self-center. And then once you get all of that done, just go ahead and grab your torque wrench and torque them down properly. Do not just go at them all willy-nilly, because if you overdo it, you can break something. And all of the hard work is done. All you have to do is reconnect this hose and put your oil cap back on if it isn't already. Don't forget about this 8mm back here. And you're all set. Now let's just take a second to stand back and look at its beauty. Look how nice that looks. It looks much better now that it's cleaned up. So let's go ahead and start it up. Okay, so maybe reconnecting my ignition wires would really help with that. And that's it. So don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Patreon, you know, all that social media garbage. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're considering subscribing, don't forget to hit that notification bell. And like always, thanks for watching.